Hi, everyone. Welcome to Philippines Startup Week. My name is Parani Damodaran, and I'm based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. So the topic that we have at hand today is cross-border market expansion and startup acceleration. The aim of this panel discussion is to showcase the different market expansion efforts or programs and startup acceleration efforts in the region. To the audience, please feel free to engage the speakers via chat. Right. So now let me introduce our guest speakers, beginning with Mr. Lance Pomerejo, General Manager of Launch Garage, which is an innovation hub in Manila. Mr. Chris Peralta, Founder and CEO, Silicon Valley HQ, and Managing Director of Manila Valley Partners. He's an entrepreneur, advisor, and community builder who's based in San Francisco and shares his time between San Francisco and Sydney. Ms. Serena Chang, Head of Market Expansion and Acceleration from the Malaysia Digital Economic Corporation, which is based in Malaysia. Mr. Luis Sia, Co-founder and Chief Growth Officer of PayMongo, a fintech startup based in Manila, who's also a Y Combinator graduate, and Mr. Nelson Igunma, founder of Sati Ventures, a venture builder based in India. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey, Parani. How's everybody doing?
Thanks for having us.
No problem. No problem. Great. So I'm excited to be hosting you. So let's begin without any further ado, right? So I just gave a very broad general introduction. So let's get the speakers to introduce themselves, tell us about what business they are in, and also just to keep things interesting, share one of your hobbies. Okay, so let's start with you, Lance.
Sure. Thanks, Parani, and good afternoon, everybody. So I'm happy to be here with a prestigious panel as well as familiar faces within the startup ecosystem. So again, I'm Lance Pormarejo, General Manager of Launch Garage. We are a tech startup accelerator and innovation hub based in Metro Manila. We accelerate tech startups through deal flow, mentorship, and programs, as well as the network reach that we have, not just locally, but internationally as well. As a innovation hub, we provide a venue for open collaboration, knowledge sharing, events, and a landing pad for global players that want a deep dive or a connection within the Philippine startup ecosystem. Um, in terms of the hobbies that I have, two might be far from each other. So one would be, deep interest with gaming, the gaming sector, specifically esports, and the other really would be mixed martial arts, primarily boxing as of this moment.
Oh, wow. Okay. Thank you, Lance.
Yes, thanks for having me, guys. First of all, I am Filipino, even though I don't sound it. I grew up in Australia, but I was born in Quezon City. So, bit of background. At the moment, I have a company called Silicon Valley Headquarters. We are an online mentorship platform. We have around 150 mentors from Silicon Valley. We have 10 plus proven startup templates. We have weekly Ask the Expert sessions, and it's really a global virtual ecosystem. And what's key is ecosystem. We have partners all around the world, like Launch Garage and others in different countries around the world. And our mission is to really support entrepreneurs around the world. One, really get exposure to international markets. Two, get ready for fundraising because everyone's raising money. And three, how do you make it sustainable, right? The startup's journey is long or short, but how do you continue to support entrepreneurs throughout their life? So that's what we do. I guess hobbies. Well, when I go to bed, I'm on. I watch two types of videos. One, I think I'm a self-proclaimed foodie, so I watch food stuff. And second, fishing. So that's what I like to to watch in my spare time. Pretty boring.
No, thank you, Chris. I think food is something that everyone can actually relate to. And if you're into fishing, then it's exciting, right? In by itself. Nelson, all the way from New Delhi, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nelson Nigunma. I'm a founding partner with Safi Ventures. We are a venture builder that is working to co-develop and scale more sustainable startups, SMEs, and social enterprises in emerging markets and for emerging markets. So although I'm physically in New Delhi, we are working across India and even looking at opportunities in other emerging economies like Southeast Asia, East Africa, and Latin America. As you can tell from my accent, I am not originally from India. I'm originally from New York. So I've been kind of living a cross-border life for the past few years, working physically, mostly between South Asia and Southeast Asia, and working on programming across emerging markets to increase mentorship, investment, and other forms of support for early-stage entrepreneurs. In terms of hobbies, pre-COVID, I would have said travel, but that has declined drastically. But I have been doing. I love to read, and I've certainly been doing a lot more of it recently. And in terms of video consumption, I definitely have found myself watching like more mukbangs than I thought I would have ever guessed. So I guess in terms of stay-at-home COVID-related activities, that's a lot of it.
Thank you, Nelson. Yeah. Okay, so next up would be Lewis.
Hi guys, I'm Luis. So I'm one of the co-founders of PayMongo, where I have the growth team. So in a nutshell, what we do is that we enable businesses to go online through seamless payments. And we're doing that primarily in the Philippines, starting in the Philippines. We started almost 2 years ago, and we're backed by Y Combinator, Stripe, Peter Thiel, and just recently did our Series A. So one of the hobbies that I have is that, I am not sure if you guys hear the waves right now, but I'm actually living by the beach. So for the past month, I've been trying to learn how to surf. I still very much suck at it, but I'm trying. And so it's been one of my key hobbies over the past month or so.
Exciting. Okay, so finally, Serena.
Hi, my name is Serena. I'm from MDEC, which is short for Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation. It is a government agency in Malaysia under the Ministry of Communications and Multimedia. We were established 20 years ago to develop the ICT and digital technologies in Malaysia. Our mandate at MDEC is to drive Malaysia digital economy forward and firmly establish ourselves as the heart of digital ASEAN. To join the slew of boring hobbies that we have, mine is reading, fiction only, and gardening. So I'm trying to build a whole farm to table effort at home right now.
Well, I'm glad to see that you're still at it. So I've actually known Serena for quite a while because I used to be in MDEC. So I was in MDEC for 5 years before I left to actually start my second venture. So currently, I'm actually doing business development for a German company who's penetrating Southeast Asia. So they call it Uber. So now that we've got the introductions out of the way, I think it's actually good to understand everyone's origin story, right? Because what we have here are effectively ecosystem builders. We've got startup companies. We've got people who invest, people who know how to coach other people to actually invest. So this is in line with our topic, which is startup acceleration and also cross-border expansion, right? So let's see. I think I want to start with Nelson, right? Because he's a venture builder from India, and venture building per se is not easy, right?
No.
I think 1 out of 100 people would probably get into that. Most people would kind of dream of something, then choose to invest instead, because venture building means you really have to put your hands and legs in there, and kind of build that company, and doing that repeatedly. So, but anyway, the definition of venture building is actually very broad. I'm not too sure So please enlighten us as to what you do and how you actually came to be a venture builder.
Yeah, sure. The venture building model is fairly broad. And I guess the concept has been around now for about 25 years. And for a lot of people, watching and listening in, they're probably familiar with Rocket Internet, which is, based in Germany and has been known for replicating successful tech business models in emerging markets. And so we are, adapting that model, for India and for emerging markets by really considering, okay, how can an early stage entrepreneur who has identified what their problem is in terms of sector, has developed a solution, is generating revenue even if they're not profitable, how can they move forward even if, they're not in a metro like a Delhi or a KL, or Singapore, even if they're in a mid-sized or even a rural area, how do they move forward? And I guess, venture building differs from incubation and acceleration in terms of that, there isn't, one program that you apply for that lasts 3 months or 6 months or a year and then ends with a pitch day or demo day and then kind of move on. We are really looking at how, this goes back to my experience with running and facilitating startup pitch competitions and boot camps. I would find that, there's an interesting entrepreneur in Cambodia who's working on an education solution, and then you kind of do something else in Myanmar. You find that someone's also working on education, and then you go to India and you find that obviously someone's working on that. And not to say that all problems are the same in emerging markets, but there are similar challenges, and you do find that there's some similarities in how to address them. And so I was always thinking, well, what would it look like if I could bring these entrepreneurs together? And so a lot of whom are solo founders and maybe working alone, maybe with one other person, part-time or freelance, and what if they actually pooled their resources, however limited they were, together, and tried to figure out what were the best options in terms of tackling, addressing that issue head on, and then using their combined expertise and resources to actually pursue vendor contracts or pursue investment, or pursue challenges. And so that's kind of what inspired Sati Ventures in a way, where it's how could we bring these seemingly disparate entrepreneurs together, and then meld things in such a way that they'd be able to move forward, even if it wasn't necessarily the best options for them, the short term or medium term to pursue investment. Because a lot of the entrepreneurs that we've identified, they include formal entrepreneurs, they include rural entrepreneurs, they include female-led enterprises who are not really on the radar for institutional investors like angel investors or VC investors, or they may be living in areas where there isn't really that kind of presence. So then it's well, what are the alternatives to move forward? And that's of course a good revenue model, a good operational model. So we try to help them build that and replicate it as much as possible.
Okay, thank you, Nelson. Also, your audio is a bit choppy. But I think we actually got the gist of what you were trying to say. Okay, so let's.
Okay, I'll try to speak
Chris. Okay, sure. So Chris, what I understand from your profile, of course, is that you are a startup founder, but you're also a community builder, right? So I don't think there are many people with that combo, right? So you're either a founder who is kind of involved with community builder, or you're a community builder, but you're not really a startup founder. I mean, that's generally it, right? So I'm curious as to what propelled you into this journey, and was it the community building and that knowledge kind of propelled you into the startup world, or was it that you were a founder and then you actually got into the community building, right? So how did they come about?
Well, I think everyone's journey is different, right? So for me, I always wanted to be a doctor and help people. Instead, I became a mentor for startups, and I'm fortunate and honored to help startups. So I was one of the early mentors at Google Launchpad. I think I mentored hundreds of startups from Google Launchpad, and they became very close partners of mine as well. So that's sort of the basis of what I wanted to do. I really wanted to help. And the way I can is through connections, because I've done deals with, you name the company. I've closed a lot of deals in my past corporate life, but also coming to Silicon Valley, and I moved there 11 years ago. Everyone's an entrepreneur, and there's so much opportunity. And if you're on the ground executing, helping startups, running, investor panels and things like that, you just become part of that fabric, right? And it's an amazing place. I'm not saying it's the best place to be, and you have to be there, even though I created Silicon Valley headquarters, but it's about leveraging upon a lot of the expertise that's there, right? And there is a culture that's very different than anywhere else. But saying that, I also work with and Ventures in Israel, where they support startups in Israel. They bring corporates over there. So Israel has a lot of expertise, and Singapore has a lot of expertise. Australia, I'm starting to discover that as well. Like, every market is unique. So back to your question one, I became an entrepreneur because if you're in Silicon Valley, you're an entrepreneur. You'll start a company. If you don't, then it's pretty interesting. And to support startups, I just have that that longingness to help entrepreneurs. And 7 years ago, I did start up a company called Manila Valley, which was discovering fierce entrepreneurs in Philippines, bringing them to Silicon Valley for an acceleration program. That model evolved, but it was pretty much the genesis of, me wanting to support entrepreneurs. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Yeah, yes, it does. Now, if I can stay with you for a short while, right? Because you did mention a few things that are, very relevant to what we are discussing. One is your experience in deal making, right? You've actually done a lot about that. You also mentioned a little bit about the corporations, right?
Yeah.
And also a lot about the ecosystem, right? I personally have not been to Silicon Valley or San Francisco. I've been to other parts of the States, right? But what I hear is that from my friends who actually live there or have visited, they do say that you can taste the entrepreneurs, the startup ecosystem or the tech ecosystem. If it does have a taste, you could almost taste it, right? Because it's like everywhere. So that kind of encourages everybody to actually get in that spirit of at least wanting to try something out, right? Because it's not easy to actually start to begin with. Now, my question is more so this: demand and supply, right? Because what we're talking about essentially when we talk about acceleration and market expansion is always about growth, right? You want to get to market, you want to be relevant, and you want to be able to scale. So first of all, you've got 10 customers, but how can you get 1,000, right? Yeah. So first within where you are, then of course, cross-border. So how involved are the corporations, right, from San Francisco, right, in the startup world, right? So how well do they mix together, right? Or how much how do they contribute to the ecosystem to make it come alive, right? Because it can't just be a one-sided tango.
Yeah, I think in Silicon Valley, what I find is that everyone's contributing, right? So you've got entrepreneurs, you've got angel investors, you've got VCs, you've got corporates, you've got, there's it's a thriving ecosystem. If you look at Plug and Play, for example, that's a great example of corporate innovation. Like, they have a lot of corporate partners looking for innovations. They will fund them. They will do POCs with them. So, it's really nurturing innovation and also funding it, right? And then they can support through the corporate backend, right? It's it's not just the money, but it's also the experience, and I think Luis has gone through Y Combinator and others that have a lot of connectivity to big corporates as well. So I think one is they foster the innovation. Two, they support through funding and also POCs and things like that. And yeah, I think they're integrally part of the ecosystem. But another thing is entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley, to take that leap of faith, you sort of have a soft landing, because if you have an idea, you have sort of a safety net where you have a beer with someone and they're an angel investor and they love your idea, they get to know you, and then they say, hey, here's 50K to start your startup. You don't really find that around the world everywhere, unless you're in that ecosystem. But in Silicon Valley, anyone can really get into that ecosystem. I don't think you really need to be special. You just need to do a lot of hard work, maybe have a great idea, and find a real business, right? At the end of the day, you have to find a real business. And so, but there's a safety net there, not just corporates, but investors, fellow peers, startup entrepreneurs, mentors, everything like that. So it's really a unique place.
Thank you, Chris. That was very insightful. I've got a few more questions, which I will come back to later. So if I can jump to Lewis. Lewis, so PayMongo, let's have your origin story first. How did this come about?
Origin story for PayMongo, right? Yeah. So, well, PayMongo happened. We didn't really have anything grand planned. We just wanted to solve like a simple pain point, which was that there was such a huge or like high barrier to entry to integrate with online payments at the time. I had some development experience. My partners were developers. We've started multiple businesses in the past. And we just found it a pain in the ass every time we had to integrate with online payments here. And so, so me and my friends, Francis, Jaime, Edwin, my co-founders, we just got together one dinner. And we said, hey, why don't we give this a shot? We were 2 weeks in before we would run out of cash. And we decided to go with that idea. We applied for Y Combinator that like a week after. And eventually got in. So YC was like our first ever check, and it really opened a lot of doors for us in terms of building the company. So yeah, in terms of origin story, it was really just from personal frustrations and building something that we felt we needed as business people and entrepreneurs. So yeah.
Okay, but PayMongo was not the first payments company in online payments company in Philippines, though, right? When it actually this thing. So having competition. I mean, if you have an idea, there's no such solution in the market. Okay, we get that, right? But since you are not the first company, right? So what gave you, in the lack of better word, I would say balls to kind of get on that journey. So how did you go through the thought process, right? I'm kind of framing it from something that Chris actually said earlier, which was you need to find a real business, right? So what was your thought process and your team, obviously?
So we were definitely not the first online payments company here. There have been a lot. If you were a business, you would do that by integrating with one of them or the banks. But it was just really hard to do so. And so we saw what other companies have done in other markets. So the likes of Stripe in the US, maybe like Razorpay in India or whatnot. And, they took a different approach to online payments rather than having steep setup fees, for example. They allowed people to integrate for free. Their documentation, their API documentation was published online, so anyone could easily integrate. Those were features that no one else in the market really had at the time, or weren't widespread. So we saw it as an opportunity to be able to really create a payment solution that could easily be integrated with us, also with like a self-serve kind of solution where anyone could just sign up online. No paperwork, no physical paperwork needed, no setup fees, and get started right away.
Okay. Because I went to your website and then I saw that part of things. So that's absolutely great. So we go to Serena. So MDEC is a government agency. Yeah.
Mhm.
So you do run or you assist or you work with startup accelerators, right? Supporting them. And I understand that I know that MDEC also runs its own cross-border, market expansion program and so on, right? So
Mhm.
how did they start, and how has it evolved over the years, right? Because when you are a company, I mean, of course, being a government agency, you will need to support the companies that are based in Malaysia, but also kind of give visibility to foreign companies
Mhm.
what the position or what you can do, right, when you come to some of Malaysia. So just taking the perspective from startup acceleration as to the companies growing, gaining market access and so on. So how has that evolved in the last 3 years for MTech?
So I think it started when we have a lot of accelerators in Malaysia, like both from government and public sector. From the government side, we have Global Accelerator Program by Magic, which Lance himself participated in. And we have Selangor Accelerator Program by CTEC. And then on the public sector, we have accelerated by VC, such as Nexia, Watchtower and Friends. And then we also have those corporate accelerators like from the local conglomerates like Sunway, Hong Leong, and DG. But then we noticed that all this are mostly about growing your business and then how you want to grow in Malaysia. So from MDEC, we've tried to we came out with market access program for them to like cross borders to other country, right? So our program is called Gain Expand and also Gain Connects. This is where mainly we try to encourage Malaysian companies to like expand their business. And because Malaysia is a very small market, we have only 32 million in population. The only way to expand your business to expand your borders. Yeah, so this program that we work with, like with partners like Launch Garage, and then we have partners from other country in Thailand, Indonesia, Hong Kong, Australia. So we are trying to help them to capture this market and also building network. So because at the end of the day, for a company to be visible in the global eye is to have that network with everybody around, right? So people who know who are these Malaysian companies and what are these Malaysian companies doing. Yeah, so that is what we have been doing.
I see. Okay, thank you for that. So Lance, so you have been working with MDEC for a while now, right? So I think you're also the market access partner for their expand program, and you are continuously collaborating with them. But from a point of startup acceleration, because Launch Garage is an innovation hub, yeah. I normally, I think everyone commonly hears, things like innovation hub or accelerator, and then they've got this program, that program, and so on, right? But what exactly does it mean to a particular company, right? What exactly does what? So if you can state maybe an example of how Launch Garage has effectively helped, um, you know, some of your participating companies or cohorts to grow,
Right.
right? Uh,
Right. So I guess to start off, Launch Garage really has two main lines of business. So as you've mentioned, we are indeed a innovation hub, but at the same time, we're also a startup accelerator. And I guess what's unique with the approach that we have for accelerating or helping out startups is that the your typical accelerator program lasts between a time-bound program, so roughly around a 3 to 6 program, wherein you bring in startups into the program, and then you end or top it off with a demo day towards the end. But the way we do it here at Launch Garage is that our accelerator program is really evergreen. And what this means is that once we bring in startups within our portfolio or within our advisory, then we continuously give them support in terms of deal flow, mentorship, and network reach. For example, the likes of the partnership that we have with MDEC, just so that we can actively keep track of the progress of these startup companies and not just end it between a time bound process. So to directly answer your question, we really dial it down to three main things in terms of the startup support. It's the deal flow opportunity. We have a branded deal flow session which we call Super Colliders. We bring in and vet out relevant investors as well as potential partners to really hear out or see which startups they should engage with and what startups can really give value, not just for the investors, but through a mutually beneficial engagement. And then lastly, it's really, the support or advisory from our mentor network. So we have an active mentor network of around, 50 plus mentors, most of which are, startup personalities who've either done exits in the past, are startup enablers within their specific regions, not just in the Philippines. And we really just want to make sure that if and when a particular startup has something that they're facing, may it be fundraising or a challenge within their company, they can just reach out to us and see how we could help them.
Okay. So Nelson, so I've worked in India, and I know that it's a very, very tough market.
Mhm.
Right? It's a tough market even for the large corporations, right?
Yes.
So, so finding a business model, finding a problem to solve, right? So we can do all of those things, right? But getting to market and growing the company, right, in
Mhm.
India, right? So, what would your advice be? What would be the top three things that a company that's targeting India or is beginning from India, what they have to do?
Well, in a country like India, the advice to start small doesn't sound like hokey or dismissive in any way, just because what is considered a tier 2 or tier 3 city here would have well over 1 million people. I mean, maybe even up to 5 or more. And so even just here in Delhi, not even counting the whole national capital region, there are about 20 million people here. Not even counting affiliated areas. So thinking about what would be considered a tier 2 city like Bhubaneswar, which is a little west of Delhi, which has less than 5 million. It's like there are people there who are actively thinking about, okay, where do I go next? Like, how do I start up here? What resources do I identify? And then how do I get out? And so a lot of the mindset change that we're trying to facilitate here is that, your path as an entrepreneur doesn't have to go through Delhi or Bangalore or Hyderabad or Mumbai or Chennai, the five metropolitan areas here. You can go from a tier 2 or tier 3 city to another tier 2 or tier 3 city, or even think about similar size cities outside of India, because frankly, what is considered mid-size or small in India can be quite large in other countries. So that is one thing that we've been trying to look at, where it's just changing that mindset around the scale. That is expanding doesn't have to mean just going to a bigger city and settling there and trying to figure out. Two, I would say in terms of market, is frankly really acknowledging that a lot of information that you would assume is available online isn't, and that even what is available online, may not be up to date or accurate. So there is something still to be said about being on the ground. That has been a challenge for us, post-pandemic and particularly post-lockdown, because in India, the lockdown here was arguably the strictest in the world. Or even domestic travel from one state to another was very, very difficult. And so, but for people, and so we've been trying to adapt our operations, where it's just we try and develop a team of people in different cities, who have a cultural affinity, with local stakeholders, whether those are co-working spaces or incubators and accelerators, or even government agencies, who are able to gain insights that frankly are not being published on Facebook posts or LinkedIn posts. Insights that are gained by people who might not even have a LinkedIn profile. Like, right, if you don't have their WhatsApp number, then you don't know how to get to them. Like, they don't know who you are. So there's something about that, and we've been building up that capacity. And then 3, I would say here has been very relevant is that there is already a spirit of collaboration informally. People are very eager to share, like, say, the phone numbers of people who you can't find online. You're wondering, like, where are they? How do I get to them? To share information about opportunities, even if they themselves are applying for them. It's like, well, here, you should consider this too. And so what we're trying to do is really formalize that, because, I mean, if you are in the loop, then that's great. They have access to those WhatsApp groups or Facebook groups or LinkedIn groups that are not really, well advertised.
Okay, we seem to have lost Nat Nelson there, but he will dial back in. Okay, so Lewis, I have a lot of respect for fintech founders, right? Because I mean, then at par or this one is probably healthcare, right? Biomedicine and then so on, and any sort of deep tech, right? Because first of all, you need to know your subject matter before you actually start the company, right? Compared to maybe things that are slightly broader, right? But having said that, okay, now Nelson is back, but okay, I will come back to you, Nelson. Right?
Of course.
Yeah. All right. So Lewis, talking about fintech, the thing is, you have to satisfy the regulators, right? Adhering to compliance. So, and I know that itself takes a long time, right? I do understand that for Philippines, there are 106 million people. So effectively, it's still a really, really good market. It's the second most populous nation in ASEAN, right? So Southeast Asia. But how do you plan to scale this? I mean, are there plans for you to actually go out of, right? To actually expand beyond the Philippines border? And how do you actually plan to actually do that fast enough, right? Because you have to adhere to compliance, right? Make sure that everything is kosher before you can actually, right, go forward. So how do you plan to attack that?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. To answer that shortly, yes, we do think about expanding outside of the Philippines, looking at similar markets with similar economics, wherein we think we could add the most leverage to. I guess the way that we see it right now is like the best thing that we can do, or the most leveraged thing that we can do as a company, is to really focus on the Philippine market, to be number one in the payment space, online payment space in the Philippines, build relationships with our financial partners, the credit card schemes, for example, and eventually expand to other markets, right? Definitely compliance, looking at the local market regulations. Those are definitely factors that we also would look at when thinking about new markets. So we have several guesses of where we're going next, some preliminary plans there. But for most part, our mandate is really to focus on the Philippines, and instead of spreading ourselves too thin, really be able to win the market locally, establish relationships with our financial partners, and eventually use that as leverage to expand outside of the Philippines. Yeah. So yeah, there's nothing concrete as of now.
Okay. To my understanding, there is no Fintech Sandbox initiative that has been launched by the Philippines government as of yet. Am I right?
Could you clarify what you mean by that?
Okay. So in Singapore and Malaysia, there are an initiative called the Fintech Sandbox, right? So what happens is government agencies, relevant government agencies, working with the central bank, they would usually call companies that are actually interested to come in to kind of test what is it that they are, trying to do, test the business model, test the solution, evaluate potential risk, and then so on. So Sandbox is kind of a test bed where you get all your questions answered, right, from all the stakeholders before you actually go to market. So because it's a structured test bed, so you kind of go to market a lot faster, right? Is there such an initiative in the Philippines?
I wouldn't say formally, at least, but our central bank here, BSP, I would say that they have a very progressive outlook on fintech, and that while we don't have any, to my knowledge, any formal program like that, they are very open in terms of talking about objectives like financial inclusion. Most recently, I think they opened up their digital banking licenses, starting out with modified rural banking licenses. So I'd say that they're pretty progressive, and they're acting pretty fast in terms of what they think would serve those purposes, right?
Okay, so I have sat in discussions or actually heard talks from the Philippine Central Bank, and I always leave very impressed, right, at their vision. So I have a question for Chris, but this is maybe a slightly more challenging question. This is in terms of investments that have actually gone into tech startups in the last few years, right? So my data is not recent. I'm actually referring to data from Prekin in 2018, where the Philippines actually received 1/10 of what Indonesia received in terms of startup investment deals. So Indonesia, of course, home to 4 unicorns, drew 1.6 billion. Singapore saw 4.9, whereas Philippines raised close to 30 million, right? Which is actually a very, not a high number, but it was okay. Now, in terms of market, when I look at the market makeup in a way, because a lot of the large businesses are still family owned, right? So you see that similar makeup in Indonesia, right? For Philippines. Philippines doesn't have a very small population like Malaysia or Singapore, right? 100 million is a lot, right? So wherein lies the challenge for Filipino companies to really grow, right? I mean, of course, Mongo, they've actually gone to YC, they've gotten their Series A from led by Stripe. YC participated as well, so they are a great example. But why do we not see many of that, right? So where do you think gaps lie?
Interesting. I think the first thing is definitely market, right? So it's a smaller market than Indonesia. There is, I think it's, if you can get critical mass in terms of deployment, you have more of an opportunity. In the US, if it's you're addressing a 330 million population, to really get more data, more information, more pull from the market to see if it's something that's a viable business, and a sustainable business. I think one collaboration is important, within the countries, because I know there's Southeast Asia, there's APAC, fantastic having Launch Garage work with MDEC, because then that cross-border will expand it. So companies in Philippines can go to Malaysia and start, rolling out their services, and there's great collaboration there. So I think that is one important thing. I think partnerships, and we talked about that, the ecosystem in the beginning. These types of forums, it's not just about my organization, my accelerator, or whatever. It's how do we all collaborate together? At the end of the day, we're all supporting the startup, right? The entrepreneur that wants to bring this business to market. Now, at the end of the day, some startups or entrepreneurs may even be okay with having their own business just in Philippines. That's okay. Why do we need to be a unicorn type of visibility? You know what I mean? Like driving a fancy car or paying for the school fees is maybe good enough for some people, right? Do we need to make $100 million, $1 billion? So I think a lot of people strive for that, to become a gem in Silicon Valley and the unicorn type of status, which I think is a bit overrated. But then again, everyone's different, right? But I think, startups in Philippines, if they look at the local problem, really get a business model that works locally, leverage upon partners like or organizations like Launch Garage that have connections to other organizations around APAC, start there. Because a lot of the times, startups that go to Silicon Valley, they're not ready to be in Silicon Valley. They want to go to the US market, but it's a very, very different. It's different dynamic, different landscape, different clients, different cultures. It's not as easy as just going there and raising some money. And then I've run literally more than 100 acceleration programs for 20 countries around the world, from 6 groups from Mexico, 3 from Brazil, 5 from Korea, all around the world. And a lot of the times they go back and they don't stay in Silicon Valley because they're not ready, right? So I think one thing is, first of all, be the market leader in your own country first. And I think there's enough opportunity there. If you really found something unique and differentiating and what consumers need or customers need, then be that market leader in your country. Find partners that can get you into surrounding neighborhood countries first, and then look at international markets like Silicon Valley, Israel, or others. And we can definitely help out making that connection as well. And I really like, sorry, a bit long-winded, but I really like what Lance said about the sustainability factor, or evergreen, your terminology, because a lot of accelerators, they're there for a week, 3 months, but how do you continue to get support? Because startups, it's not a 3-month journey. It could be a 6-year, 8-year, 10-year journey. So how do you continue to evolve and get that support to help you grow and exit your business? Yeah, but what we're trying to do is we're very focused on early stage companies, but we're partnering up with groups that help us with growth on the growth side. And then right now I'm actually working with a few companies from an M&A standpoint, but this is like 10 million, 15 million ARR. And I'm introducing them to working with a few M&A groups in Silicon Valley. So, I think there's a lot of different groups for different stages, and you just have to find them to help you scale.
Some good points there, right? One is when you said that you have to go into markets when you're ready, and also in other words, what you said, that you have to validate the markets, right? Because you can't simply go into a market because you want to. But this is also something that Lewis mentioned just now. You have to assess the market and see whether the market has got the right mix or similar mix, right? So that your solution is relevant in that market. So product market fit,
yes,
right, is key. Yeah.
And just quickly as well, everyone's startup journey is different. 2, Luis Mongo, he's the matter expert there. Me giving him advice is just an opinion, not advice. He's the matter expert. He knows what's best for his company. You know what I mean? So we work. The idea of mentors is just there as a extension arm of their team, to support them, to give them maybe insights on something they may not have thought of, or help them with some templates, or the menial stuff, so they can really focus on their business and what they're really good at, right? But it's just an opinion. You're going to get feedback from a lot of different people with different experiences. But I think the key is, one, become that matter expert. Make sure you capture the whole, your market first, right? And you'll know to scale, and those partners will actually come to you at that time, just like Paymongo. These guys are doing amazing over there in the Philippines. Now it's time for them to shine internationally.
Okay, all the best with that. So Serena, I do agree with what Chris said about, or I can see the point of is being a unicorn. Does everyone have to be a unicorn, right? Versus you actually having a good business. Right?
Mhm.
And of course, I know a lot of business owners who got great cash flow, great revenue stream, right? They've diversified, but they may only be $100 million business. Right? They don't necessarily have to be a unicorn. I would be happy to actually have a business like that.
Yes, send them my way.
But from a country's perspective, right? Every country wants to have as many unicorns as they want, because that brings prominence to the companies. To the country, right? So my question to you is, from uh, uh, from a nation building perspective, right? Of course, you're focusing on digital economy. How much important? How important is it that you actually get your unicorn, right? Rather than building 10,000 great businesses.
I think unicorn is a bragging rights for all countries. That's all it is to a country, like to say that, like, oh, I have this unicorn, this and that. That's why my digital economy is great, right? So at one hand, we do want to champion to have like a unicorn in our country, so it's just to like put a mark on it. But at the same time, I think that there's a lot of value in developing all these great companies. It's almost like when in Germany, when they have all these Mittelstand, right? These are the backbone of the nation. I mean, their Mittelstand could be like Bosch, who still calls themselves as Mittelstand. Whereas, like, if we have this backbone of great companies, that will really do wonders for the economy, right? And the employability as a whole, not just having a unicorn per se, right? Yeah, that's what I think. Personally, I feel that we should aim to build like 1,000 great companies, and hopefully one of them is a unicorn. Then we all have everything that we want on our plate. Yeah.
Okay, great answer. Lance, as an innovation hub and as mentors, market access partners, and so on, right? So I kind of want to ask the same question that I asked Chris earlier, right? So how do you build this great ecosystem, right? Because it's in a way the iceberg, right? Because what you see or what people see is the few prominent companies that are actually out there, but then again you have this huge ecosystem or support system that's actually there holding it up, right? And it actually comes from the bottom, really, right? You can't just say that, oh, we want that one company, that great, one, two, three companies, right? It's about building your base. So like what Serena said, Germany has that, India has that, right? Great base, so that some companies would actually shine. So what would it take for Philippines to get to that point where you have one unicorn right now, but how can you make that 10, right? So how do you build the base? Where do the gaps lie, and then what do you think Philippines should actually focus on?
Right, right. I guess I'd really like to echo the sentiments of Chris as well. At the end of the day, it's really about the spirit of collaboration. You know, we all want the best for the startup ecosystem, and how we could really achieve this would be enabling, not just people within the ecosystem, but as well as our friends from the government, or friends from the academe. So just to give one example, one of the things that we're running right now here at Launch Garage would be close ties with tech business incubators nationwide. Tech business incubators are business incubators within colleges and universities who have a great amount of research, and it's just a matter of figuring out how we can accelerate or transition from their incubation stage and see if these companies are viable for commercialization. So this really fills up the base of discovering or at least vetting out startup companies that may have the ability to scale up and probably become, quote unquote, a unicorn. But I'd like to also echo Serena's sentiments, just outside of having, the bragging rights of saying country A or the Philippines has this and that unicorn. I think this would also be good down the line in terms of attracting players within the region or within the country. So this would be very attractive for investors outside of the region to say, hey, we might want to look into the Philippines. They have this good company, hopefully the likes of Paymongo, wherein you know we're really able to develop quality startups that are solving real problems. And it might be a good opportunity for them to jump in and say, let's set up a Philippine fund, or let's set up, programs and supports really linking our services or our expertise to the Philippine market. And I guess this was something that we've seen, for example, in Indonesia with the likes of Gojek. Comparing the countries within the Southeast Asian region, there's a big interest for investors and the like in the Indonesian region, mostly because they already have some sort of a understanding that, hey, this country could produce a unicorn, and this is something that we might want to look into. And I guess to really wrap things up and relating it back to collaboration and market expansion programs, one of the things we've learned working with MDEC, the past two cohorts that we've conducted, is that cross-border market opportunities or expansion programs provide an opportunity for startups to really see what's going on in their neighboring countries or different regions. And this gives them an ability to have an overview whether they should be adapting or localizing, or at least understand before they do hop into a different country and say, hey, this might not be a location that we want to expand into, before really pouring tons of resources and time really to enter the specific markets.
And I just wanted to add, if I may, look, one thing
Sure.
is, instead of looking at the unicorn type of status, what about representing something for the country? So maybe Philippines can be the fintech capital of the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Put a lot of energy of programs like Lan said, money, support, government, to make DeFi the biggest. Philippines as the biggest DeFi country in the world. It's going to really disrupt modern currencies, payments, lending, borrowing, investing, trading, derivatives, everything like that, right? So, how do maybe we could be represented as something, and so all the energy is on one thing. Do you know what I mean? Like a lot of the times, and this is me, you do a lot of things. It's hard to really get one thing done well. But if we do one thing well, then that could be potentially focusing all that energy and then making Philippines on the map, right? Sorry, sidebar there.
No, it's all right. Valid point. Good. Idea. Nelson, are there cross-border market access or market expansion programs where they do product market fit analysis, things like that, currently available in India?
There are a few programs here that do promote those cross-border opportunities. Not quite on the level of doing that analysis, but they do try to offer, access to mentorship or, investment opportunities and whatnot. But a lot of the focus has been on information gathering and sharing and even matching, but not necessarily like transaction advisory or M&A advisory in that way. And so that's an opportunity that we do see here, both within India and for entrepreneurs who are looking at India as a market, even just one part of India as a market, because you could really just kind of land in one region and stay there for a while. But even for Indian entrepreneurs who are looking at other emerging markets, so that's something that we have been looking into, because we realize that in terms of runway, even if it's not specifically equity investment, that a lot of say like a startup, SMEs, types of enterprises need here. They do need some type of financing, and there's a massive gap between, on one end, if someone has a micro enterprise, there is access to microfinancing, and on the other end, someone has growth stage, tech platform or marketplace, they do have that access to equity investment, and there's a really big gap in the middle in terms of what so-called like regular business that isn't a unicorn but is generating revenue, has good cash flow. What do they get to use to scale up their operations and access new markets?
Okay. How
did that answer the question, or do you?
Yeah, you did. So a follow-up to that is, how involved is NASSCOM in the startup ecosystem in India? Because I know they're a very well organized setup. They do have members from a lot of the large corporations, a lot of great influencers there. How actively are they involved in the startup ecosystem in India?
Yeah, so I mean, NASSCOM is involved, and they're very much affiliated with the government. I mean, there really is a vision here in India of kind of two guiding principles, like one being digital India, getting more people online, having more products and services being developed and more accessible, and then the other is a recent thing called Atmanirbhar Bharat, which is Hindi for a self-reliant nation or a self-reliant India. And so obviously like NASSCOM is a big part of that. And so it's like, say, Niti Aayog, which is kind of the national like policy think and do tank of the country, and even CII, the Confederation of Indian Industry. The thing is that I've noticed though is like, so, and I've known people who have participated in those kinds of programs, NASSCOM programs or Niti Aayog programs through Atal, incubation centers and whatnot, is that there's a big focus right now on like creating a lot of different entry points, and that has been great because then there aren't barriers in terms of location necessarily in terms of getting plugged in, but there's still a lot of ground to be made in that area, definitely. But then there's also kind of the next step of like, well, how do you engage with entrepreneurs who may not are using tech as part of their solutions, as part of their service delivery, but may not see themselves in like the founders of a Razorpay or Ola or Swiggy. They may not be even thinking of that scale, or entrepreneurs who are informal, who again have good cash flow, but for whatever reason are maybe not incorporated or not compliant, or just not may not even have a robust digital presence. So there is some like more ground to be covered in that area where it's sharing that information, bringing more people online so that they can access it. But then even for people who may have economic or social or cultural barriers, well, how do you keep reaching them? Just I think there's definitely a need for corporate innovation here, but all the pressure or the impetus on like creating jobs, because tens of millions of people will be needing jobs in India over the next decade every year. So it's like it can't just be like the Tatas and Reliance or the Birla Group the big conglomerates here to create those jobs. There's scale for them to do that, but then there's also what is that middle layer where there are mid-size companies that are just generating like $10 or $100 million per year, who can actually, even if they're not employing as many people as the largest companies, they may be able to keep them on the payroll longer and provide a little more stability. So we see an opportunity with that, and that's definitely some ground that larger institutions could cover in the next years.
So, Lewis, can you share a little bit about your experience, with Y Combinator? Where I'm getting at with this is there are many accelerators, small ones, large ones, and so on, right? Some are more known publicly, some are not, right? But what were the key things that Y Combinator could actually give to PayMongo that you felt that you couldn't get anywhere else?
Sure, when you think about Y Combinator and their content, the things that they teach, all of these things are actually published online for free. So, the classes that we, or the talks that we attend there, minus the one-on-ones with the partners, they're the exact same ones recorded on YouTube. So it's pretty much democratized in terms of like the high-level concepts that they teach. But what I found to be unique in being part of the program itself was just the standard of people around. That definitely being surrounded by founders from all over the world, and also like the partners who have definitely scaled companies to billions of dollars. I think that was really invaluable. On the founder level, I think being around several dozen other startups working for 3 months till our demo day really sets the base for the company, especially when you're a young company, having to work at such a pace to get the demo day. For most of the companies that goes through YC, that really sets the base for how the company is, and it's ingrained in their DNA. And I definitely feel that in our company, even if we're a year and a half after YC, it still feels like we're there. So they really set the standard there. But second would be, I guess, the network. I think, like you guys have mentioned a while ago, the level of capital flowing in the Philippines is not nearly enough. Indonesia has 10x more funding. We are a smaller market, but it's still disproportionate in terms of how big of a market we are. We are the second biggest population, with the GDP larger than Vietnam or whatnot. So, there's a huge gap in terms of capital coming in. And what really helped was that having YC backing us, introducing us to the right investors, really made the fundraising process much easier for us. It de-risked the investment for a lot of venture capital firms, and that in itself was very invaluable. So the way that I see it for future founders or Filipino founders who want to go to YC is that it really opens a lot of doors and serves as a connector between founders and international capital, which I think is very much needed for the ecosystem to grow at our current at where we are currently.
So if I were to simplify things, right, there are two stages. One is early stage, the other one is growth stage, right? So that's the broad way of actually looking at it, because both have different problems. And one of the things that we discussed earlier was having a real business, having a business that actually is relevant and then can scale, right? So with early stage accelerators, I think the idea is to get the founders to kind of think through their business, the product market fit, for them to do market validation, to actually get the right business model, and also to fine tune their go-to-market, right? And so that's early stage accelerator. There are also business accelerators that kind of look into the later stage, and I have seen at least number of companies a couple from Malaysia, and then a few from the region that has actually they're not early stage companies. They have been in the market for about 3, 4, 5 years, and then they get accepted into YC, and they always come back with great value, because what they've done is that sometimes you have run your business for about 3 years, and you think that you've already figured everything out, right? So you've kind of drank your own Kool-Aid, but you can't see what's going to happen 10 years from there. No one can, honestly. But you're kind of like saying that, okay, this is where we are, and then this is what we are 3 years down the road, and having a great group of colleagues to kind of bounce off ideas, and also most importantly challenge you, really helps, right? Into seeing how that company can actually scale into the software future, right? So if I can actually come back to Chris, so with your setup, I can see that you built a bridge, right, between the States and the Philippines, right? I guess how, knowing what you know today, with especially the COVID-19 situation where a lot of companies have actually closed shop, right? What would your advice be, or where would you focus your efforts on, or what type of advice would you give to startup founders who are building the company, right? How should they look at it from now on?
So a year ago, we started building the platform, and the whole idea was really just digitizing everything that I was doing in Silicon Valley. So, running programs. We have 150 mentors that I've been working with hundreds of hours of mentoring experience. We've got templates that I would give to the startups, whether it's customer personas, forecasts, things like that. Would do a lot of workshops and panels, and it's because there's a lot of expertise in Silicon Valley. So it's just my journey, right? So we've got a platform and we digitized it. So moving forward, anyone can really come on the platform. We are launching the new version in 3 months, and then it'll be fully operational. So we've just got a closed ecosystem at the moment, but people are welcome to sign up now or ping me. But basically, it's connections to experts in Silicon Valley. So maybe their hindsight could be your foresight, right? We've also created APAC Valley, and I have Manila Valley. And APAC Valley, if you go to apacvalley.com, we've got a few programs. So it's all about really execution. So we're also like an entrepreneur. We're just running programs. I have a lot of partners that are running the programs. And our next program is called an Investor Ready program, or a boot camp, run by a serial entrepreneur, 5 startups, 3 exits. His last startup he sold to Google, and I invested in that company a long time ago. And he wants to help other startups, and that's the program. And we work closely with Launch Garage to promote other programs, so stay tuned on that as well. And I'd love to work with all you on this panel as well, because there's a lot of expertise here. So I think, just like me, I think the key is really execution, right? Get your hands dirty, knock on the doors, get clients. But obviously there's some building blocks, your foundation, that you need to set first, right? So a good team, a solid team, everyone knows what they're meant to be doing. You've got a game plan, you've got a product, you've got a playbook, what we call internally, and then just execute. Get as much revenues in the door, and I believe investors will come as well. I know COVID makes it harder for people, to network. You can't have coffees anymore and things like that, but everyone's going online, right? So not just us, these amazing events. The government as well, you can reach out to DOST and the government. I really think that there needs to be some central group that's untethered to making money to support and connect everyone together in the ecosystem. You know what I mean? Like a one-stop shop, like some like government to facilitate that. So if you need investment, then you'd go to this VC funds because that's in your vertical. If you need acceleration, Launch Garage, if you're going to Malaysia, things like that. So I think moving forward, 1, execution, 2, your network. Just continue to build your network, not just with investors, but everyone. And hopefully that opens doors for you to, again, go back to the first one, which is execution. End of the day, just close those deals.
Excellent. So I think we are close to the end of our session. So from what Chris has actually said, execution, focus on that. The other one is build your network, right? Serena, what would your advice be for companies that are just starting out or in fact looking into expanding their business territory?
That will be market validation and product market fit. So if you have any programs or if you know anyone or mentors, talk with them, your idea, bounce it off with them. And because they are from that community, they will know what works and what don't, right? So these are valuable inputs that will help you to know to whether you want to pivot your business model, or is it a product change to be able to enter those markets. That would be my 2 advice.
Lewis? What would be your top 2, advice, like pitch instruction?
These are for founders, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Right. I guess first would be definitely just to give it a try. I think in the Philippines, there are definitely 2 sides to it. Your supply of founders and capital coming in, and I think it's very important that a lot of talented folks in the Philippines see building startups as an actual opportunity for them, or an actual possible career path. And I think as we mature the ecosystem, more and more people will see that. So definitely, I would advise them to just give it a shot. Number 2 would be a bit more specific, but myself and my co-founders were very much active in trying to help early stage or pre-seed startups as well. I'm sure Lance and Launch Garage are also doing the same thing. So definitely reach out if ever you do need the help. Do we need the Lance? There are a lot of people in the ecosystem who are willing to help. And it just really takes as much as asking, so that we can do so.
Thank you, Lewis. Nelson, what would be your takeaway?
Yes, I would say to the entrepreneurs who are listening and watching, whether they just want to stay local or they're thinking about going global, I think documentation is really important. Not just for kind of tracking what you're doing internally and maybe gaining insights from what's working or what's not, but I think it's also a good way to prepare for a due diligence process, even if you're not thinking about pursuing investment. I think that's a challenge I've seen where where eventually someone will ask a question that you do have the answer to, even if you can't quite recall it. And there's something to be said for being able to say, well, I don't have the answer off the top of my head, but I can go look, and actually have somewhere where you can look. So I would recommend that. And then, for anyone, especially from a cross-border lens, market expansion lens, I think there's something to be said about, being humble. I mean, regardless of the size of the country that you're coming from or how much success you had in your particular city or country, even if the country you're going into is smaller, or is still emerging in some way, there is something to be said. Is this no matter how many years you live there, how much research you do, there's just you're always going to be learning, and there's going to be something that someone who's local, who may not be as formally educated as you, or may not know as much of the jargon as you about the ecosystem. There's an input that they'll have to share, and you need to be open to receiving it and reciprocating the help that you're getting.
Nicely said. Nicely said. Thanks. So Chris has left unfortunately because he had something to attend to. But we heard from him just before he left. So final Lance, what would be your top two takeaways or advice actually?
Sure. I mean, wrapping everything up, all the advice that the entire panel has shared with us today, following execution really would be resilience. As startup founders and, enablers within the ecosystem, we really need to remind ourselves that we need to keep adapting, iterating our process, cliche as it may be, failing fast, and just really be true to ourselves. At the end of the day, if we are solving a real problem that a particular market needs help with or is facing, and provide a substantial, scalable, and good solution, then everything else would follow along the way.
Okay, Lance froze, but we got a gist of what he was saying. So, if I would like, so in order to summarize this panel, I've really enjoyed hosting it. What we've heard from Lance, Serena, Chris, Nelson, and Lewis is focusing on execution, build your network, do the market validation, product market fit, not to drink your own Kool-Aid. That's important. Always learn and be open to receiving. And from my personal experience, look at cash flow because cash flow, you have good cash flow, your business survives. If not, then you're out of business. And nobody owes you anything, right? So whether it's in your market or you're moving to another market, it's up to you to convince them that your product is actually has value, right? Will add value, right? Because all the government agencies and all the accelerators, they are support platforms, right? But nobody really owes you anything. It's actually up to you as founders to be what Lance actually says, resilience, right? To actually show the resilience. So with that, I'd like to conclude this panel. Thank you very much for staying with us, and thank you, dear panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Serena, Nelson, Lewis, and of course Lance who has dropped off, and Chris who has left. On behalf of the Philippine Startup Week, I thank you.